Right, I just want to talk quickly about the beekeeping year, so the jobs that a beekeeper does with the colony throughout the year. We've got 3 or 4 slides that cover this. You can read through those. I'm just going to rattle through it very quickly just to give you a feel for the type of things we're doing at various times of year, and we'll cover the detail of most of them much more later, but just to give you a feel. So we'll start in the autumn at the beginning of the winter. So at this time of year you're checking the stores, assessing the quantity of food that the colony has got to last through the winter, and topping them up with feed, which is a sugar syrup if necessary. So preparing them for winter means making sure they've got enough stores, giving them any sort of protection that they might need from mice or woodpeckers, that sort of thing. We'll talk more about that when we talk about pests and diseases. Strapping them down to protect them from wind and storms through the winter, strapping the hives down. And then over winter there's really nothing to do. You just check the colonies maybe once a month just from outside. You don't open them up at all from sometime in October until about late March. You're unlikely to open the colonies. You just leave them, but you check them, just check after a storm that they haven't blown over or something like that. And through the winter we tend to heft the hives, so just lift them on one side to get a feel for the weight of the hive. And when they're full of stores at the beginning of winter, those hives will be pretty heavy, and they don't change much for the first half of winter, but through February and March in particular, they can suddenly get very light as the colony is trying to expand rapidly, using up lots of its stores, and they could run out of honey and feed stores towards the end of the winter. And if you can spot that is about to happen, you can give them a fondant, so a solid sugar feed in February, March time. That might be appropriate as a sort of emergency top-up feed at the end of winter. So hefting the hives is what we call it, just monitoring the weight. So that's your assessment of their stores through the winter without actually opening the lid and letting the cold in and disturbing the colony. So that's really all you're doing through the winter. And then in the spring you're watching the entrance for the first sign of pollen coming and going on the back legs of the bees. And that's usually a good sign that there is brood in the colony. And once it's warm enough to open the hive, then you'll do a full first inspection. And when that is depends entirely on the weather, but typically late March time. I'm looking forward to going into the colonies for the first time next week if the weather's warm enough. So I think generally you say if you're comfortable outside in shirt sleeves, then it's okay. But essentially you can tell by the bees. When the bees are busy flying, then it's fine to open the colonies. So at your first inspection in spring, you check. The main thing you're checking then is that the queen is laying well, that you've got a good brood pattern, that the colony has survived through the winter, there's a good number of bees, and that they've still got a bit of food stores left. So you may want to be topping up feed if they're short. So then in the spring the colony builds up in strength very rapidly, size of colony. So you'll need to give them extra space by adding supers as they need it, and very soon you get into weekly inspections, checking Hooper's 5 questions, and very soon starting to think about swarming. Large colonies might be wanting to swarm early, but the main swarming season is going to be from mid-May until early July. So you'll have a plan for swarm control, and when the colonies are likely to be swarming, you'll be wanting to check them once a week to monitor that and manage swarming. Then in the summer, there's less to do, really. This is when you can sit back and enjoy the bees. The bees are very busy, but as a beekeeper, once you've got over the swarming season and you've got plenty of space on top of the hive in terms of extra supers, you can just let the bees get on with it, really. The colony strength will build up, and you just need to make sure they've got enough space for the nectar they're bringing in. So a really big colony could bring in nectar and honey to fill a super in a week in a time of very good weather that corresponds to lots of flowers being out. Other times your empty supers might sit there for many weeks on end, not really changing. So it's very dependent on the weather, but it's a great shame to miss opportunities if they come up just by not having allowed enough space. So you're just conscious of the conditions and monitoring that. And then towards the end of summer you start to thinking about harvest. So there'll be a period probably in September when you'll harvest the surplus honey, leaving enough for the bees all the time. And then you'll need to help the bees to defend their stores against robbers. So that's wasps, other bees, other colonies. Strong colonies can rob out weaker colonies, which means going in and taking their honey stores. So that's something you can help the bees to defend their colony by reducing the entrance size. And then we're back to autumn again and preparing for winter. So that's the sort of annual cycle that you're going through with the bees. Yeah. Okay.